Okay, so just to give a quick introduction then, so this is going to be a Q&A session with the CTSI Qualifications Team. So that's Jackie Fisher and Rebecca Taylor joining us today. And the reason we set this up was in the first trainee network meeting we had. There was a few questions from trainees within the ITSA region who weren't quite sure about some of the processes, had some queries on some of the information on the qualification materials, and it seemed like it might be a good idea just to kind of ask these questions directly. So thanks to Rebecca and Jackie for coming along, giving us the opportunity to do that. And what I'll do is I'll just get started with the questions. So the first one we've got is, could we have more training for trainees undertaking portfolios? Instructions on collation and information on expectations would be really helpful. And I think just a bit of a background on that question was, I know that assessors do receive training on that process, and we have verifiers as well, but I think trainees don't receive any direct training, or if they do, I'm not sure that it's it's immediately obvious where that might be. So yeah, it's just a question really on if there might be an opportunity in future to provide some trainees on actually putting those portfolios together.
Yeah, there isn't actually any official training for the portfolios and building a portfolio. We years ago, when we first introduced portfolios, we did have a portfolio building day, so we can look to reintroduce that. But with the portfolio, there's no right or wrong on how you put it together, and that's what we wanted to be careful of. Is we didn't want to put an example up on the website, because everyone would then follow that example, and it might not work for you as an individual. Because there is no right and wrong. It's a case of you identify your evidence against the criteria in the portfolio, and you can reference it however you like. Most people reference it A, B, C, D, and then you just reference. When I built a portfolio, I just physically wrote a letter A in the top corner of my bit of paper and wrote it on the matrix sheet. I know it's all electronic now, so you can call it whatever you like, but we can certainly look in putting a training, we'd have to do it virtually probably, and I think that probably works better for most people. And we can look at putting some sort of virtual Teams meeting together for it. But we'll try, if we did, it would be quite small and bite-sized, because as I say, there's no right or wrong on putting a portfolio together. It's what works best for you and working alongside your portfolio. But we'll follow up on that, definitely, because we did do it when we first introduced portfolios. So it's something we can follow up on. We could probably do that fairly quickly, to be honest, in the new year for people, because if it is virtual, it just makes it a bit easier, doesn't it, than finding venues and things like that. So,
okay.
But the important thing about a portfolio is referencing. It is just finding your evidence, whether it's on your F drive. You know, you can actually put that in your matrix, can be found in lock cupboard number 2, you know, item number 3, because then if the assessor wants to see it, they can physically go to that cupboard because they know where to find it. Or if your verifier wants to see it, then you just have to scan it in and obviously share it on SharePoint. So you don't have to build a massive portfolio. I know people do, and I would be the same. I would like a big file and copy the papers in, because I'm old school, I'm afraid. Whereas now you could say something on your F drive, you could create a portfolio on your F drive, or even in SharePoint, and just upload the material and just give it a number, ABC, and that's what you put in your matrix. And then you could share that with your assessor, doing it all online. And the other important thing I always say to candidates is, before you start building your portfolio, make sure you read the criteria actually in the portfolio itself, so that you can cross-reference your evidence, because you might have quite a substantial report that actually covers, you know, food, but it might also cover elements in the generic portfolio. So, you know, the first thing I always recommend to students is actually read the portfolio, because once you read it and you see what you have to meet, you actually could do that fairly quickly, because you've probably already got the evidence there, especially as you're in stage 2. And if you have got experience as an officer, you can go back with your history as well. So evidence can go back up to 2 years and possibly even 5 years. because obviously if you've done an investigation and you're using that for unit 5, you might have done a food investigation, but sometimes it takes you a good few years to put an investigation together, especially if you're ending up, going down the court route. So look at something you might have done in the past that you could use as evidence, because the evidence can be 2 years old, and if it can go back further than that, but just do a quick Q&A. So basically, if you've written a report that's 2 years old, but by the time your assessor sees it, it's 2.5, you can do a quick Q&A with your assessor to say, well, actually, the process is exactly the same now. I wouldn't have done it any different now to how I did 2 years ago. And therefore, you can use that piece of evidence in your portfolio. If the process has changed or something different, you just write the question down, write your answer down, and attach it to your bit of evidence. So, so my advice to everyone on portfolio building is read the criteria and then look at what you've already done or doing as part of your day job, because you'll probably find that you would have met that criteria already or are working towards it already. But in relation to the training day, we will look at speaking to one of our lead verifiers to put something together in the new year.
That's great. Thanks, Jackie. It's just occurred to me, some of our trainees might have some follow-up questions on some of the finer points of anything you mentioned. Is it all right just to ask them to put their hands up, and if there's any clarifications, we can address them as we go?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, so yeah, if anyone does have any questions on anything that does come up, just raise your hand and then I'll stop after the question's been answered so we can follow up. So the next question we've got is the LMS seems to have an option for course material to be read aloud, but that is sometimes incompatible, I think, when there's PDF documents in particular. So the question we had from one of our trainees, is it possible to review the content on the LMS to make sure that it's a little bit more accessible?
Yeah, we'll have to look at this. The LMS system we've got is the system we've obviously been inherited at CTSI. It's not a great system. We recognise it's not a great system, and we try and make it as easy as possible for what it is. We'd have to investigate that in regards to the compatibility, and if it's even a function that we've got as part of our contract. I don't know. We'll investigate, and that's all I can sort of say at this stage. If it's not compatible, well, going forward, we are looking at a new system. That's what we're hoping for going forward. Obviously, that doesn't help current trainees, because we would see the year out, I'm assuming, or for this training cycle on the current system. So we'll investigate and see if there is a read aloud option that's going to be compatible. I don't know the actual answer to that. All I can do is investigate. Sorry.
I've just got a quick follow-up question on that. So I suppose my question would be, if we were able to come up with a solution that might work for some of our trainees locally, would it be possible to kind of come back to you with potential kind of short-term solutions? If we have a suggestion, is it possible? I don't know what that might be at this time. It might be saving the documents in a different format and sending it through to students who need it, for example. If we come up with something like that, we can come to you.
Absolutely. We're always trying to make things as easy as possible, because we know the system is not a great system. So some people have asked for it to be emailed to them, which we've done. It's a lot of emails though, so please don't ask for that, because that is a lot of work. But if we get to that situation, that's what we do. But yeah, if you can find something, if there's another program that can be used, I know some people who have dyslexia, they have speak aloud programs, don't they? So it might be we could just download it in Word format, and we could put it up there in Word format perhaps. But yeah, come to us and we'll have a discussion and see what we can do. Absolutely. We're working on a system that we know is not brilliant, and we just try and make it. If you come to us with ideas, then we will look into them. So
okay, that's great, thank you. Next question is on the written learning content on the LMS, which often contains typos and errors to the extent that it's difficult to understand. I think speaking to a trainee when I arrived, they said that it looked like some of the content had kind of been cut from one place and put into another, and it looked like it didn't kind of join up. Very sort of.
I know when we put up material as printable material, it did go up with track changes in it. But I know that was identified and then sorted, was my understanding. But I will double check that. So I don't know how old this reference question goes back to. In regards, if it's the actual, if it's within the actual material itself, when you turn the pages, then obviously that would mean us re-uploading them, because what happens, our process is we receive it from the trainer, we then share it with our production team, they put it into a program for comparison and then score mix and send it back to us. So obviously we then upload the SCORM file onto the system. So that's the actual process we work on. So we'd have to look, if what I'd like to see is if that's actually in the actual material that itself, or whether it's attached to the printable materials we then put up at a later date. Because if it's the printable materials, then I'm hoping that should have been changed, because that was identified. If it's actually in the course content, then obviously we'd need to re-upload all materials. The impact of doing that is, if we re-upload materials, it doesn't recognise where you've completed. It means you then have to go again from the start and work your way through the screens. That's the impact of us uploading materials again. The system's not clever enough to realise that you've already done lesson 1 to 5 and that you're now on lesson 6, even though we've only uploaded certain elements. So we're in a bit of a catch-22 as to how much we re-upload and remove, because that means everyone gets impacted, or whether we just send out or just add a new tile at the bottom of the screen. But certainly, if anyone, whoever asked that question, could give us a bit more information, whether it's in the course material or not, or whether it's in that downloadable material. So if you could follow up with that, Ben, that would be lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the feedback that I received was from some time ago, but it was also raised again recently. I think what I would like to ask everyone to do, if you come across any material, specific examples, I think screenshots would probably be helpful. And perhaps what I could ask from the qualifications team at CTSI would be, rather than uploading it and erasing progress, when we come across specific examples, would it be possible for a clarification to be sent through? Is that something we could do? It might be on an individual basis, which I realise might be time consuming, but it does then prevent our trainees from having to restart their progress. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that's what we don't want to do, is have to restart progress for people, and that's why we're constantly in a sort of discussion internally, aren't we, Becky, as to the best solution going forward for things. But yeah, if it's on the printable stuff, downloadable printable stuff, we can easily amend that. That's not a problem. But yeah, let us know and we'll have a look. It could be we just send a blast email out to everyone, but that does mean everybody gets it. So if you're attached to more than one course, you might get quite a few emails if that's the case, because at the moment we can't blast email just on one specific course. The system only lets us blast email everybody that's on the system, which doesn't help because we want to target just one course. But that's not how the system works, I'm afraid. We have gone back to the provider to see if that can be changed, because that's not an ideal solution at all.
Okay. Next question we have. Yeah, so this one, I think for me was, yeah, a little bit of a concern, which was when there's work to be done prior to the training day. We've heard examples of this being communicated by a training provider with CTSI via a WhatsApp message, and sometimes it's been communicated with very little notice, within kind of a day of the actual training day taking place. And also that there's no notification through the LMS that there needs to be work done prior to the training day, which actually impacts on the value that training day has for trainees. So I think the question is really, Could communication be improved? Could it come through as an email, something more official than a WhatsApp message? If it already does, perhaps it's a notification settings that trainees need to be aware of on the LMS, in which case if there's more information on that, that would be really useful as well.
Well, I'll let Becky say after anything afterwards, but for me, some of these WhatsApp groups are set up outside of CTSI. It's not something we actually do. So that's set up by the trainer and obviously the communication with the trainees. I agree, if they're giving you work to do for your contact days the day before, that's not ideal at all. Sometimes we're obviously not seeing into those WhatsApp groups. And I can understand that, because if you want to ask questions or anything else, but sometimes it's also useful to have some of the questions ourselves. But yeah, so that WhatsApp is all completely done between the trainer and the group itself. In relation to it last minute, I can only assume that it's something the trainers decided to do as they're prepping for the day, because obviously we've not then had notification of that. So we need to ensure we're communicating back with our trainers to say, if you are changing, well, you shouldn't be changing things last minute anyway, but I know that they want to add things as they go along, but they need to give more notification, and we'll communicate with the trainers to give us more time to ensure that we can do that communication as well. Yeah, the system, again, we could look at the system on notifications, but some of this last minute stuff, it doesn't actually come via us at all. Sometimes we're not aware of that last minute stuff that the trainer's done. So we do need to ensure our trainers communicate better with us so we can support trainees better. But we can look at that with the trainers. But Becky, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I was just going to reiterate around the WhatsApp groups. So obviously they are just independent of the cohort of trainees within that unit. So we don't have any dealings with that. And I think sometimes the trainees and the trainers forget that we are involved as well, and we kind of need to know if there have been changes and amendments, especially if there could be someone that doesn't check their WhatsApp quite as often. They might prefer to have an email. Sometimes messages within a WhatsApp group might be missed. So it could well be that actually the WhatsApp chat has taken over from actually the LMS system, which is where notifications and updates should really be addressed. But with things like that, so if someone does have those kind of concerns, they should always just come to us directly. So if they're saying something was missed, then they should always just email in to let us know, and then we can address that with the trainer to say, if there was amendments, this shouldn't go through a private WhatsApp group because chats will get missed. If someone hasn't been on there for a whole weekend and they come back on a Monday, they might have 50 or 60 messages that they've missed between a group chat of other people, so things might get lost. So please do just come to us, and we can then address that and send it out via email or via the LMS for content. So that can then be looked into.
Okay, so the WhatsApp groups are unofficial. Where information has then come through a WhatsApp group and it's come through too late and it's affected someone's training day, to me it feels like that people affected by that in that way, and if they're able to evidence that that's happened, which they should be able to because they'll have a WhatsApp message, it seems to me that perhaps they should be entitled to redo that training day, just because if the value of it has been negated by the material not being sent through the official channels in a timely manner, they've not actually got value for money from that training day. Is there any possibility to reschedule those, or for them to attend other training days if they've still to occur?
It would depend what it is. So generally this for me sounds as though it would probably be a teletutorial, because they tend to be based around any concerns that delegates have had during their contact days. So the contact days are pretty structured. So the content is uploaded to the LMS for delegates to download, and that's then addressed during the contact days. This sounds as though it would likely have been a teletutorial, which is a 1-hour session. So that could quite easily be a case of that can then be rebooked, or the delegate joins another cohort perhaps, because for some units there are multiple cohorts, so depending on which cohort it is, if that works for the delegate, or it could just be that the trainer then needs to spend some time with that delegate that missed that information. So I don't think we would, if it was for a contact day, I can't imagine that there would be a whole structure change to a contact day. So it sounds to me as though it would probably have been one of the 1 hour teletutorials, which we could definitely look into being rebooked, and a session with the trainer again. Absolutely.
That's brilliant. That's really helpful. So I would just say to any trainees then in that case, either to get in touch with me or with the qualifications team directly if you've had a teletutorial that's been affected by that. Okay, move on to the next question. So this is about Unit 6 in particular, which was apparently a challenging read, difficult to take the key information out of the course content. And the question is to ask if there's any other formats available. Read aloud wouldn't help if working, as paragraphs are quite large. So I think it's a formatting issue, and the information in the course material itself is difficult to kind of to interpret.
I think when I've looked at the Unit 6 lessons, they are quite long lessons and they are large paragraphs. But the difficulty we've got is that obviously the trainer is trying to convey the information needed. I'd have to speak to the trainer about that, because obviously I don't have a TS background, so I couldn't read the material and see how it's difficult to extrapolate material from that. So we'd have to go to the trainer and see if we could simplify it in any way, or if it does need simplifying, it could be this. We'd have to look at, how many people this is affecting as well if we do a massive change, or if it's just affecting a couple of people. We could see if we could send them in Word format where they could break it down into smaller chunks themselves. But obviously when you write a piece of work, the paragraphs are all linked to that one particular thing you're talking about in that paragraph. I think I'd have to go to the trainer and look through speak to the trainer on this one, because I don't have the TS knowledge to be able to read it myself and see how difficult it is to extrapolate information. We are relying on the trainer's knowledge and to share that knowledge to give to other people. Be interesting to see in what ways the person's finding it difficult to get the information out. Is it just because there's so much on the page and reading it is difficult, and therefore we could see, although grammatically it wouldn't be correct, we could break up the sentences or something to make it easier to read. I know when I've just had a quick look now while we've been on the call, and there are a lot of chunks of words on that page, but I say it's trying to make it's related to that area, isn't it? So I don't really have an answer to that question, to be honest, apart from I'll have to look into it, because I don't see what the risk is as well on changing it massively, and I don't have that knowledge to be able to do that.
That could also, just be something that they actually address with the trainer. So obviously they have the contact days with the trainers, they have the teletutorials. That could actually be something that they then contact the trainer to say, do you like it? Because it could just literally be a certain area of Unit 6 that they're just not grasping. So keeping in contact with their trainer as well, because they could find actually the whole group, the whole cohort is struggling with that area, and that could be something that the trainer then addresses during the teletutorials. That actually if you go through these contents in a certain way, if you look at certain other things as well.
What would be interesting, is it the interpretation of the written word? Because is that linked to lack of experience or more support needed, or is it just that the wording is written in such a way that it cannot be understood? So there's a few questions there that I probably want a bit more detail. So if if you can find out a bit more information, or the person wants to call us and we can look into it with that individual, then we can have a look. But this is the first feedback we've had in relation to the actual content being difficult to extrapolate. So it'd be actually interesting to find out a bit more how and why. to be honest.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a really helpful answer, actually. So I think, you know, whoever submitted that question, if you do have queries on the course content and, you know, being able to access it, or if there's any issues that you're unsure of, as Rebecca said, you can talk to your trainer. And if there's accessibility issues, because I can see there that the read aloud software was also mentioned, you know, please do raise that with me or with the qualifications team directly. Because I think in another conversation that I've had, I think it was with you, Rebecca, was sometimes that you don't get a huge amount of direct feedback from trainees and students. So, you know, if we can facilitate that, then I'd be very happy to do that. So if you do have any questions and you're a trainee on the CPCF qualification, do let us know if there's anything specific. And then, yeah, as I said, directly to the qualifications team or via me, I'd be happy to facilitate that. Hannah, you've got your hand raised there.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask something. It is to do with the trainer, but when we've been on courses, I'm not doing the regulating market, so it wasn't my question, but what is the trainer actually supposed to know about the course? Because we've asked quite a lot of questions about the portfolio and the training material, and they've sort of come back saying, we don't know, you have to go to CTSI, the exams, for information about like what you're meant to do in the portfolio, what you're meant to write. They don't really seem to have a clue what we're meant to do. They just sort of pass us on to yourselves. So I'm not really sure of like where their role sits in and who we're meant to ask and when.
Right, for me, the trainer's role is literally just to train the content of the course that's linked to the syllabus. They're not contractually contracted to discuss portfolios or anything like that. They are literally there to deliver the training. So, you know, a lot would depend on how involved they are in their general working lives and other areas as to how much they would know about other aspects of the qualification. So, to be honest, your best port of call is always us at CTSI. You know, we work with it day in, day out. So, you know, it is our lives, whereas for everyone else, it's an added bit to their day jobs or to their working lives. So they wouldn't necessarily have the same knowledge of detail that we have. The difficulty that we have is we're not trading standards. So for us, it's harder sometimes to put it in a working context for people. But the actual processes, the requirements, the deadlines, the timescales, we obviously, that is all us at CTSI, the administration side. So my recommendation is ask the trainer, but they may not know, and it's not necessarily, it's not their job to know. They are contracted to write the materials and deliver the materials for that unit. Obviously they should know the syllabus because the training material is linked to the syllabus. But in regards to portfolios, unless it's another role they hold with CTSI, they wouldn't necessarily know anything about the portfolios.
Okay, thank you. Just a bit of feedback. I think it would be really helpful if, say, when we started back in September, if we could sort of like, maybe there could be like a sort of like a training day or something like that, just so that we can discuss it, because we're only reading off the documents that are online on the CTSI website and obviously speaking to our assessors. So we kind of tried to work out what we need to do in the portfolio ourselves and with our assessors' help, but obviously not from the qualifications team. So I know obviously it was mentioned about a portfolio day, but it would be really helpful, just so we know exactly what we're doing and that we're doing it correctly.
Yeah, I take that on board. I'm also just thinking off the top of my head that maybe even if we give a summary to trainers, you know, of key dates and requirements, that they can answer some of the more basic questions, and then obviously we can focus on the others. But I think possibly the idea of also having on top of a portfolio building day maybe a registration session, you know, maybe something I've been thinking about, that's over the last couple of weeks, that we can maybe every sort of 6 months, as people start to register for exams, we could do an online call like this, And
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Even if it was just
Um,
recorded, if it was just like 10 minutes of you summarising exactly what we need to do, it would just be really helpful, because we kind of just went in quite blind and just had to work out ourselves and speak to other people as well. So that would be great.
Yeah. Also, please call us if you're unsure. Please just make that phone call to us. You know that we often have many conversations with people where we're actually walking people through things on the website or how to book, and we actually have it. Are you sitting in front of the computer and actually walk them through it? So please, you know, if you're struggling with anything or get any queries, give us a call. That's what we're here for, and it's really important. It's hard for us to have feedback and then you think, oh, why didn't you just give us a call? We could have helped you with that question or that situation. But now we'll also look at putting more formal things in place as well going forward. So
thank you, that's really reassuring.
Yeah, I suppose what's hard for us in the team is that because we do live, eat and breathe it, we sort of sometimes make the assumption that the information is on the website and it's easy to find, whereas sometimes it's not easy to find. And sometimes just by picking up the phone to us and going, I can't find this, is there on there? Sometimes we go, oh, it's here, and sometimes we go, oh, we haven't got that up there, you know. So it does help with sort of communication on all parts and to improve things, you know, because we do eat, live, breathe it. We make those assumptions that it's easy to see, it's easy to find, and it's not always the case. You know, everyone works differently, and it's trying to put it in places which other people would recognise, which doesn't always work. So, but yeah, I've got a note to say we can look at doing some sort of summary for trainers, and also looking to do if we can do a quick Teams call for new registrations as possible actions going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question we've got is regarding Unit 1 for the coursework. The question is, can we have examples or a guide to what type of scenarios would fit? So I suppose similar to the portfolios question, but for the coursework for Unit 1 and perhaps even sort of all of the Stage 1 courseworks.
Yeah, we could, but the difficulty I just see in this is that sometimes the questions aren't massively changed from year to year. You know, they are just sort of tweaked, and some of them, especially Unit 1, is probably even harder for people to do because it's a reflection, and people find reflection really, really difficult because you have to reflect on what you do, what you've learned, how you might have done it better if you were doing it again, and that's what people do find that difficult. There is guidance on the website on reflections. My only concern is if we put examples up there, because the questions are quite similar year on year out, it could be seen as possibly disadvantaging people or advantaging people. So it's something I'd have to speak to the examiners about in relation if we can actually put an example up on there. Yeah, it is quite difficult one, that. But I do see, I think what's really important, I've got the question up in front of me that's on the website at the moment. What's really important is actually breaking down the question like you would in the exam. What is actually required in that question that they're asking you in the coursework, and really looking at the specifics. You know, when you get exam technique is get a highlighter and highlight the important words in that question, isn't it? I would recommend people try the same for the coursework. Yeah, I'll have to speak to examiners about putting an example up on the website, I'll be honest with you, because I know it is tweaked slightly. It's not massively changing currently over the years. There's not massive changes to it, because obviously the question has to relate to the syllabus, and they try and make the question as accessible to people as possible. I don't know whether everyone finds every coursework like that, or if it's more the reflection one for Unit 1 because of it being reflection. But I'll speak to the examiners and see what they say, but I do have my reservations on that, I'll be honest with you.
I'm just trying to think back to my studying days, which was some time ago now. But one thing that I remember from university was sometimes they would give you like a not an example answer, like a model answer to an essay question, but it would potentially be like a good paragraph and a bad paragraph, and then they would maybe annotate that to show where the kind of the marks were, you know, when they were picking up marks in a good answer, what the kind of content looked like for that kind of model answer. So I was wondering perhaps if it's possible to do something like that. To me, that question is asking, you know, not just necessarily about the answer, but also the depth that you need to go into, or what kind of analysis it might be that CTSI are looking for.
But on the actual question, it does give the assessment criteria, and it tells you the percentage on each criteria that's given. So for me, for example, I've got the question at the moment, evaluate is worth 30% of your coursework marks. So to me, that is one of the areas where you can score high, and it's about you evaluating what you've done. So for this, it actually abilities to show how have you monitored and reported on your activities and performance. So, you know, you could write a paragraph about that yourself. Have you evaluated your activities in relation to your regulatory objectives and your organisation's strategic priorities? So there is on the actual material, on the actual coursework, it does give the assessment criteria and the percentage marks. So you can see where most of the work marks can be awarded. And with reflection, the evaluation is going to be, because the reflection is about reflecting on your work. You know, I did X, Y, and Z. That process went really well as far as I was concerned. I looked at the legislation and referred to that, you know, in my feedback back to the customer, but I simplified that for them so they could get it in layman's terms. So therefore, I felt the communication went really well with the advice I was giving that consumer. You know, and then in relation to, it's trying to relate it back, isn't it? And I think that's what people find really hard. But what would be useful, Ben, is if you could have a look at that criteria that's on the website for the coursework, because it is on there, and it's whether we need to put more information in, because obviously it's got the assessment criteria, it's got what the abilities are to showing, it's got the percentage marks that each section demonstrates is marked out of. We could certainly look to see if we can do a good and bad paragraph and give some feedback on that. And it could be from a few cycles ago. So I could certainly look to put that up. I like that idea a lot. And we could maybe put that in the guidance, in the actual coursework itself, so it's all in one place.
Yeah,
yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because a lot depends on people's recognition of being able to interpret that criteria as well, which is always difficult to do. So if we need to add more information to this, then please come back to us, you know, because we look at this and our examiners look at it and they all work together on it and they think they've covered it all, but obviously for some people it's not, the information isn't there. But I do like the idea of the good and bad paragraphs, and I can see to the examiners if there's something we can pull without identifying anything specific.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the answer that you gave, Jackie, did give lots of examples of ways that you can approach that question. So hopefully that's been really helpful to the trainee who submitted the question. I will definitely have a look at the criteria and I'll send through any questions that I might have on it. I have the same issue that you do as well, in that I'm not a trading standards officer, so sometimes that stuff kind of I'm not 100% sure where the kind of the technical query might be.
Yeah, putting it into context that people can understand, absolutely. But that's why we also then go back to our examiners. If someone's got a query that we don't really know, then we'll obviously ask the examiners to support us on that. So we have obviously extensive support ourselves in regards to making better feedback for people. So.
Yeah. And I think also, just to reiterate, if you're a trainee and you do have any queries on what the coursework question is actually asking you, then you know, please do get in touch with the qualifications team at CTSI and ask for some clarification. So I'll move on to the next question, which is, could we please have more detail regarding the layout you expect for the coursework for Unit 1? So I think, again, this is a similar, this is along a similar vein. If there was perhaps a good or bad paragraph which addressed formatting, perhaps
Again, I think it's this is a case you just write it as you would a document in Word. You put your paragraphs. If you're referencing to specific legislation, I know there's a question on there as to which form of referencing it should be, then you can use the Harvard system, but we don't stipulate what system to use. You know, you can make your own system up because we don't mark on that, not like universities where they mark on the system. Referencing systems, they sometimes mark on things like that. We don't look at that at all. So you can literally just, if you reference in something, just number it. And so putting, what I used to do is either reference it in the paragraph itself, or you can put a number and reference it at the bottom of the page. You know, so yeah, I think when you're doing your coursework, it is a case of introduction, your body, and then some sort of conclusion or recommendation, depending on what the question's actually being asked for you. So again, think back to those sorts of lines, like when you're at school, when you're taught those aspects, and keep it that simple. And if you are referencing stuff, you can write it actually in there, or write it as the number with it written at the footnotes as a footnote. So again, there's no general right and wrong for it. It can just be a piece of paper with the information written on it, so long as you're answering the question. That's what the examiners are looking for. The question's there. Are you answering the question? Look at the assessment criteria that's written in that information and think to yourself, have I made a point on each of those assessment criterias? Have I talked about my like in this one we just looked at, unit 1, the business objectives? Have I referred to that? Yes, I have. Okay, that's fine. Have I referred to, you know, the other section where it talks about knowledge and legislation? Have I referred to the legislation in my piece of coursework? Is it the right legislation that I've referred to? You know, yes, I have. No, I haven't. If you haven't, oh, I should be referring to it because it's on the assessment criteria. So therefore, you know, go back and have a look and see what legislation you should be referring to, if that's what's required or if that's noticed. So it is a case of being sort of investigating a little bit. What's the question asking you, breaking that down, and then looking at the assessment criteria that's been set and sort of breaking it down and making sure you've answered to as many of those assessment points as possible.
Okay. I think I'm hoping that's kind of answered the question and the next question as well, which is on the referencing system for stage 1. I think it sounds like what's happened is there is no specific system, so there's no information on a specific system. So maybe our trainees and other trainees are looking for something that might not be there. So I think certainly for me, what we'll do in future is make sure that information is relayed to trainees in the region, that it's purely about answering the question, and as long as you have referenced it in whatever way you feel is appropriate, then it's going to be acceptable for CTSI.
Yeah. I'll look to put add something into that information as well about referencing, because we can easily update that document on the website.
Sure. Okay. The next question is, should work-based evidence for portfolios be redacted? It doesn't look like there's any guidance on that. So yeah, I'm guessing that's stage 2 portfolios.
Yeah, everything should be redacted. There should be no personal detail coming out of your local authority at all. It's just general GDPR. You need to follow your GDPR policies within your local authority. I know what happens with our system on SharePoint. When you're uploading things onto SharePoint, it actually notifies us if there is details on there. So we are able to then remove it or go back to the candidate to get that changed. So we do have that in place ourselves. It's only happened once, I think, but yeah, if it's going to go out of your local authority, it needs to be redacted. So that's personal names, names of companies, addresses, telephone numbers. I know years ago people used to get black marker pen and we used to do it on paper. Just, you know, but obviously if it's a piece of work that's going on your system, then obviously, and you're referencing to your system, then that's fine, obviously, because it's your assessor who's going to see it and cross-check the criteria against that bit of work on the system. But then if the verifier wants to see that evidence, then obviously that will have to be saved, downloaded, and then redacted. So yeah, so if you're sharing it with people outside your local authority, you need to apply your GDPR to it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jackie. That's a really clear answer on that one. Last question I've got here is, do you expect stage 2 portfolios to be completed prior to sitting exams? And is there a time limit for when they can be submitted following sitting the unit exam? Okay, so over the last few years, we have changed the goalposts because of COVID. So the regulations, if we are running it in a normal situation, is that a portfolio, if you're taking practical, oral or professional interview exams, should be submitted prior to taking those exams. Because of COVID and the impact that's had on people getting experience and going out doing visits and just general impact of COVID on your work and the situation you found yourselves in, we have changed that ruling and we have extended the submission of portfolios to allow people extra time. So at the moment, as it stands, your portfolio doesn't need to be submitted before you take any practical, oral or professional interview exams. We have just, I think it was about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we had some more queries from candidates who are still struggling with submitting and completing their portfolios. So we went to the QAB and asked if they could extend the deadline again to give people more time to keep working on their portfolios. So currently, the rule is, if you're working on portfolio, you have up until, make sure I get this right, Becky, 1st of April 2023. That's right, to do your portfolios. Originally, a little while ago, it was extended to April 2022, but because of feedback we've received from people, it's now being extended another year. Okay, so you can take your exams this coming May and not submit a portfolio and then work on your portfolio. But obviously our advice is your portfolio and study for your exams should work hand in hand. They support each other because the portfolio is about the application of the legislation and the knowledge you're learning. And that then helps in turn with when you're sitting in the exam, you might get a question, a scenario, and you have to apply the legislation to the scenario. So our recommendation is try and do it hand in hand, but obviously we recognise the impact that's going on for everybody at the moment. I know there's been massive avian flu outbreak in our region in particular, which I know may be impacting people as well as another thing for you all to deal with. Becky, any other information on that? I think
yeah, I mean, if people wanted more information on it and to push back their portfolios into a further year, there is an announcement that was made. It went out via email to everyone. I know a lot of the time our content goes into people's junk boxes or it just gets lost in the mass, but it is on the website. We do have an announcements area, so it is sitting in there. It will be going out in the newsletter today as well, and so all it will be is going into the Teams form and completing a request to have your portfolios moved back into the April 23 submission deadline.
Great, thank you. Shona, you've got your hand up there.
Hello, just a quick question. If the material that we're then using in the portfolio goes beyond the 2-year mark, would we then have to do a Q&A on that material where we hadn't had to before?
I personally would recommend it. Just a quick Q&A with your assessor, just to show that you have evaluated the evidence, because it is now over 2 years old. Obviously we'll accept evidence going back 5 years, but that's what my recommendation would be. And it could be a quick, just one question. It doesn't have to be detailed at all, but it's just showing to your verifier that yes, it's older than 2 years, but we've looked at it again and we still think it's valid, or the process has changed slightly. So yeah, very quick Q&A.
I just ask additionally onto that, do the portfolios have to be submitted at those May and November points? So for instance, if I went beyond the portfolio just going to get them done then come the next summer before the second year where I'm just saving out the metrology. Can I get those portfolios submitted before that?
You can submit a portfolio at any point you wish. There's no deadline in regards to the general portfolio. The only rule we have, or did have, is about professional interviews, orals and practicals. But obviously, but if you were doing the food, you could submit, well, that's got an oral. No, so
it's product safety. Product safety is the only one that doesn't. Yeah,
you can submit that next week if you had it nearly finished. There's no deadline. It's only if you're taking those exams was the traditional deadlines and the rules, but obviously the rules have changed, which doesn't help the situation. It makes it a bit more muddy. But you can submit at any point. If you finished your metrology portfolio before the 1st of April, then send it in once you've finished it. If you finish it by Christmas time, send it in at Christmas. Tell your assessor, say happy Christmas, verifier. Here's my metrology portfolio, and they'll go yay. But yeah, as soon as you finished it, send it in.
James, did you want to ask a follow-up question as well?
Yes, sort of. I don't know if it's following up what you just said. With the coursework on Unit 3, that's Unit 3, well, like Unit 1, but Unit 3 coursework, if that makes sense. Yeah. That one says you have to do like an interview and stuff. What happens if you haven't got like the operational sort of necessity or anything to do that at the moment, if that makes sense? Like, so if we can't do an interview, because it's going to be a bit rushed if I did.
Right, so then what I would recommend is you put a request in to extend. But when you say you can't do an operational interview, so I'm just trying to bring up the coursework so I can see what it's in relation to, so bear with me. Is that, so you're not holding any interviews at all at the moment, not even over Teams or anything like that?
So that there would be sort of interviews sort of ongoing, like in different sort of investigations and such like. But with regards to that, so like we've not had an opportunity to be trained on how to conduct an interview. So it'd be daft to put us into an actual proper interview to then interview someone. Does that make sense? Yeah. And my understanding is in Unit 2 is when, as in that, so next year is when we train to do interviews. So it doesn't, do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of backwards.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the question at the moment because it says, how did you plan to conduct the suspect interview? I'm just looking at the assessment criteria. So at the moment you've had no training on that whatsoever.
No.
So let's look at it.
I think my manager's quite concerned that although we could probably facilitate it happening, it'd be a bit rush, and then it's not fair to put me and there's another guy obviously doing it into that. And I think she's a bit concerned putting us into that position without proper support and training, which it would involve with that sort of timescale.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Right, what I would probably do, I'm just looking at the criteria. It says suspect interviewing, use a suitable model of questioning that enables the facts of the case to be established, explore the due diligence, defence and mitigating circumstances. It says consider the different types of interview, knowledge of the different types of interview, preparation plan and the application of the requirements. I'd have to double check, but on reading that, I could possibly say, it's only my interpretation, that you wouldn't necessarily have to do a formal interview, pacing interview. Okay, so, but I will double check on that because, as you say, this is the start of the system. Therefore, as you say, you wouldn't necessarily have the training to do a formal interview, especially under PACE. So it's about the preparation. So I'm reading that as about the preparation. Have you considered the different types of interviews? So in my document, if I was writing that, I'd be saying I considered it. Don't know them all. I know there's one under caution, there's a PACE interview and there's something else, isn't there? I'm not 100% sure. But if you wrote about those and then talked about which you felt was the most appropriate one for what you're investigating, I would have thought that sort of level would be enough instead of you actually formally doing it. Because it's not about the application, it's about, it's not like a portfolio building exercise when you have to evidence you've done it. It's about what would you do. So I don't think I would double click, but I'm interpreting that you don't actually have to do it because it's not about evidencing that you've done it. It's about what would you do. But what I'll do is I will get better clarification on that, because it's not like a portfolio, it is coursework. So it's not a portfolio when you're evidencing you've got the skills to do it. It's actually looking at what is needed to be done and what would I do if I was in this situation. So it's a bit more theoretical than actually doing it.
No, I thought I could do it. Yeah, I thought potentially I could do it sort of theoretically. It's just that, like, obviously in the first 2 lines it says like where you have planned and executed investigatory steps up to and including a suspect interview.
Right, yeah, nice.
So that was the bit that made me think, oh, then we should do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what level of involvement are you having on interviewing? Are you just having nothing at all within your local authority?
Well, I think we're sort of like building it up. So I'm getting, like, obviously there's a lot of stuff to learn, you know, like the basis and stuff, because and then sort of building up. I'm aware there's interviews, if that makes sense. But I know there's not, and obviously with an interview as well, my understanding is we can't just like pull someone in for an interview just to one or two box. So then there's also like the operational aspect of what happens if no one needs to be interviewed. Then there's people don't turn up for the interviews as well. So even after all that planning and getting a case and putting it all together, we get there and they're not there. So will that impact my mark as well if I manage to get one in?
No, well, I wouldn't see that as being an impact, because you've done all the prep work for it, and that's what they're looking at, isn't it? That's how I'm interpreting the question. I'll have to go back to the examiner and ask the examiner at what level what do they mean by execute investigative steps up to and including a suspect interview. Produce a report explaining the following. So it's that sentence there, isn't it, that you're asking about? Yeah,
and then so I mean, like, my understanding sort of with the investigations as well, we have got someone going, but it's kind of like quite far on. So I wouldn't. But to start one to do this, I think, like, properly, I'd have to start it sort of start to finish, if that makes, even if I've got like help and stuff. But then that's time. I don't think there's enough time.
Yeah, no. I agree. I wouldn't have thought they would be expecting you to do an investigation from start to finish at stage 1 at all, because that's more your investigations unit at stage 2. That's your unit 5 at stage 2. Let me go back to the examiner. I will then feed back to Ben, and then Ben can share it with everybody in the group, because I think, what's it say? Your report should include reference to case law guidance, and evidence should include copies, excerpts of actual investigative supports and statements. Documents should be appended but redacted where appropriate. That's what it's saying. Okay, I will have to find more information out for you on that.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry about that.
I think I might also be able to support in that question a little bit as well, James. Jack, if you are able to feed that back to me, that would be really helpful, because what it will enable me to do is organise appropriate training and potential appropriate opportunities as well. We'll have to look at the timing of it and everything and try and make it work out, James. But so there's ABE training which is available for trainees, which I would encourage people to sign up for, the introductory overview course. And if you need information on that, then let me know. I can also look at organising PACE interview training as well. I appreciate that it's not the module that you're currently doing, but I will be organising introductory level training to complement the CTSI and the RCO qualifications. And if a shadow interview is something that might be useful, James, then please get in touch, let me know, and we can potentially look at doing that in another local authority if there's an opportunity available.
Yeah, no, that sounds brilliant.
Yeah, I was just, when Ben said about shadow interviews, I've actually sat in one myself, a PACE interview as a shadow. This was when I first joined, to get some understanding of TS work, and it could be that's what is all that's needed. So, but I need to get that clarified. What does it mean by execute investigative steps? So that's what I need to clarify, is the level of detail. It could be that you do all the prep work, you don't actually do any more than that, but then you just evaluate on that. So I'll find out a bit more for you.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Very quickly, hopefully we've got time for one more question from Emma.
I was just going to help with that last question because that happened to me on my investigations one last year for Unit 3, and I prepared for the PACE interview, but the person didn't come in due to COVID. So I checked at the time and they said that I could do it as if the person had come in. So I had exhibited my redacted PACE preparation, and I talked. There's a really good section actually on the LMS that goes through what to do in a PACE interview and all the rest of it for Unit 3. You just need to find it because you might not necessarily have got to that stage, but the information's all there. And so I looked at that and I wrote, you know, this is what I would do and all the technical things we'd need to look at and the model we'd use and things. And they allowed me to do it that way. So it's just to help with that. And also just to ask, follow on from that. So in our coursework last year, then we did this big investigation. We covered a lot of the criteria for the portfolio this year. But is my understanding correct that I can't actually use that report in my portfolio? Because the issue that I've got is that I did all that work and I put it into the report. A lot of it went into the report rather than into work-based documents. And I've been told I can't retrospectively add that into work-based documents and I can't submit the report. I know obviously we can deal with that maybe with the Q&A, but I just wanted to sort of check in terms of, you know, like you don't necessarily write down your thought processes or how you've come up with things. If I could go back and tweak that, but it's really difficult.
Yeah, I think the thing is we have to be, I'm wondering, will your systems not allow you to go back retrospectively or put
yeah, no, I can add in, you know, like I can fill in the document with all the stuff. I did it at the time as well. I did it during my investigation, but it's all written in my coursework report rather than.
Oh, I see. So your evidence is your coursework report.
Yeah, my evidence. Yeah, where I've looked at the defence and the case law and the burden of proof. It's all in my report. But it's not a work-based piece of evidence. Unfortunately, I left those things out of the report that because I never interviewed him, I never went into the due diligence thing. So it was in my prep, but I can't prove it. If I could just pop it on what I'd done at the time to put down in a work document or add on my thought processes into my case diary to prove that I did that, because I didn't know the criteria for the portfolio when I was doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really difficult one because it's an investigation you've done, but you haven't got the evidence to show that you've actually done that, although you went through the process.
Yeah, I went through it all because I had the same problem as James in that I'd never done an investigation. We hadn't had any training on PACE. There wasn't really the opportunities, and I was only part way through an investigation when I had to hand my Unit 3 in. But as I said, they were very flexible and I was still able to complete it and do well in it. So I wanted to reassure James of that they made other ways to do it. But now I can't seem to use all that work that I've done, even though it ticks off all those boxes, because I didn't put it on the right form at the time.
Have you got that evidence anywhere else? You say it's in your coursework, but do you have any supporting work you did for the coursework?
I'll have a look and see what I can put together. And
so when you thought about your PACE interview questions, have you got that bit of paper with your PACE interview questions written down? Because that's the sort of thing that would be your actual evidence that you put in your portfolio.
Yeah, I have. So I'll see if I've got any thought processes and defences and things for one of the ones I did at the time. I'll see if there's anything on a work kind of document that I can. Otherwise, I guess it's Q&A, isn't it, to say, what was your thought process about the defence?
Absolutely, that's the thing. It's not about reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
You don't have to go and do another investigation. It's just looking at what you've already done and just seeing, have you got it written down anywhere else, even if it's in a notebook somewhere, if you've still got your notebook from that time or your coursework, you know, when you're going through the stage 1, because even if it's in a notebook, that's still your evidence of your questions you were going to ask.
Okay.
So have a look and see if there's anything, you know, when you talk you know, did you talk to someone about the due diligence you're going to do for your investigation? You know, if you spoke to a manager, they could write your witness statement that you had that conversation and we talked about X, Y and Z, and Emma could show that she was looking at the due diligence, so they could give you a witness statement, not as in a formal witness statement that you guys do, as in a portfolio statement.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that someone who you talked to at the time could write, and that's your piece of evidence you can put in the portfolio.
Yeah, and what do we do I've still not done a PACE interview because of people cancelling during, you know, some people it couldn't take place because of COVID, or people don't always show up and things. It's just not always an opportunity. Is there, for the Unit 2 stage 2, isn't it? I can't remember what the unit number is. For the investigations portfolio, is there any other way of satisfying doing a PACE interview? Because I've done so much prep for it, but the guy didn't turn up.
Yeah, no, well, what we are saying, think outside the box.
Okay.
Aren't we, at the moment, because we recognise the impact everything is having on people. So the QAB are accepting things outside the norm. So take what you've done, and maybe we don't usually agree with simulated evidence, which is where you don't actually do it, but it could be you do a role play just for this one element. You do a role play
with the assessor or something.
Yeah, and you do that, and that's your evidence, because we are trying to get people to think outside the box at the moment. You can't hold PACE interviews because people aren't turning up, COVID, so you've got all the prep for it. So do a role play with someone.
Yeah, so there's ways around things. Yeah, okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, and that's what we've got to try and do at this moment in time, because of the impact of everything. It's not a case of always constantly trying to push the deadline back, because it just makes more work for you down the line. It's trying to think, I've done all this work, what other way could I demonstrate it? And just it could be a call to us and say, oh, I've done my 5 products, can I bring them back and do it on my desk? Do you know, if you're testing a product in product safety? And at this moment in time, we'll be going, yes, you can, because we know the impact. So it could be that you do a role play at this moment in time, and we will accept that.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, try and think a bit wider than everything having to be formal, because you're still, if you do a role play, you're still demonstrating the skills you've got to put in place, and your assessor, if they're the person sitting opposite you in that role play, can see the skills that you're and the prep that you've done. So does that help a bit, Emma?
Yeah, that's reassuring, thank you.
We are trying to be as flexible as possible at this point in time, because we know the impact. You know, we in the office at CTSI, we don't know the physical impact that you're all going through. We just obviously know the impact we have. So if in doubt, give us a call. If you can think of another way of doing it, give us a call, put the suggestion to us, and then we can share that wider as well. You know, if you come up with an idea in your region for something, share it with us, and we can share that with other regions. But we are trying to allow people to think outside the box with work. So if you can think of an idea and you don't know whether it's acceptable, give us a call. And then if we say yes, it is, we'll put it in writing to you. You can, that's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Well, I think there's no other hands up. Does anyone have a quick question they wanted to ask? Right. Okay. Well, listen, thank you, Jackie and Rebecca, for coming along and answering all those questions and all the advice that you've given for the qualifications process. I hope that's been helpful to everyone who's joined the call. I've certainly learned a lot, so thank you very much for coming along. As I said, we've got this recorded, so I'll make this available for our trainees who might not have been able to attend the call, and also will let assessors know that this is available as well, as it might be helpful. Louise, did you have a question? Okay, your hand is up, but that's
if this is something you want to do again in 6 months' time, then we're more than welcome to host it again, do another one for new trainees, or if other questions are coming up, or even 3 months' time, at the beginning of next year, more than happy to do this again. Definitely.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Jackie. I think what I'll do is encourage everyone in our region to to ask questions and to share concerns they might be having with the process. So we'll have a good handle on what information it is we need, and we'll be in touch. I think also it'd be really helpful perhaps to do it at the to do it at the start of each new cohort, just so everyone who's going to be joining that cohort knows from the beginning what to expect, and what kind of submissions are acceptable, what they need to be looking for, and everything we've discussed here. Basically, I think that would be really helpful. And also I was going to ask if the qualifications at TSI is the email address to reach your team on.
Yeah, that's the best email address. Obviously we all have individual emails, but the qualification one is an inbox which we all access and can access. So if you're already having a conversation with one person, you might want to keep that dialogue going, because it could be that I pick up one email and then someone else might respond to your feedback from that. So but if you want to keep to the same person, you can more than welcome in your email put, been talking to Jackie, she says, can Jackie reply or something, and we as a team, although other people see it, will prompt everyone to do it. So yeah, but that's the best email address to get us on.
Okay. And would you mind putting me in the direction of a phone number, because I think you mentioned that it'd be all right for people to call. So if you've got a phone number, we can reach you on.
The education general number, sorry, I have to look this up. It's 01268
01368
01268
01268, sorry,
582
582
242.
242. And what's that number for? Sorry.
That is our general education number. So that comes through to everyone in the team again. It'll either ring on our computers or ring in the office, and then someone will from the team, whoever's working, will pick that up. If you wanted to speak to someone specific, then they'll transfer it through to the individual you might already be communicating with. I know on emails sometimes we have our generic phone number, sometimes our direct numbers. So yeah, we can transfer it if you're already speaking with someone directly.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll make the phone number and the email address available to our trainees, and I'll encourage them to get in touch with feedback and questions. So
yeah. And all I want to say is, if we don't know, we can't improve things. So please, you might think your question's silly, but it might actually improve it across the board for everybody. So do feedback to us, whatever it is, because as I say, if we don't know, we can't improve or change things.
Damien, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. If we apply for the extension for the portfolios, but we managed to get it finished on time, we can still submit it on time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem at all.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, it's been a really useful session, so very much appreciated.